Also a trope I've been obsessed with lately, kind of, ish. And he will kill her for it, so there's that. But this book is everything. Elle Kennedy is everything. I want to read everything she's ever written. Do not ask me what it's about because I truly cannot tell you. I still have no idea. I was lost through the whole thing. Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. My name's Sam and this is my June wrap up, and I read 21 books in June. So June was an incredible reading month for me. After March through May being kind of I felt like I was hitting a reading slump. I felt like I just didn't have the time that I used to have to read, and I was afraid that I was running out of books that I was enjoying, and June changed everything. I hit 21 books, which is my highest number so far this year. I think I had like 17 in January, which was my highest, and then I just broke that by a good number, and I'm kind of hoping to break that in July. But June was great. So for the people that like statistics like me, I read 21 books in June, which came out to 7,413 pages, which was also my highest page number. I was a little bit nervous because I hit 17 books in June, but had read far less pages than January. So I just barely hit more pages than January. January was 7,339. That's because I was reading one of the Outlander books in that month. I had an average rating of 4.16, which is pretty average for me. I have rated something like 46% of the books I've read this year with 5 stars. I am pretty generous in my 5-star ratings, and that doesn't bother me at all. So I had 1 book that was a reread, 6 fantasy books, 2 graphic novels, 2 horror, 2 nonfiction, 2 paranormal, 6 romance, and 1 thriller. And I read those across 19 physical books, no surprise there, 1 ebook and 1 audiobook, which is pretty good for me. I don't listen to a lot of audiobooks and I don't read a lot of ebooks, and I am working on fixing that. As far as my audience breakdown went, I read 7 adult books, 1 middle grade, 7 new adult, and 6 young adult. So you can definitely see my trend in shifting away from YA and into more new adult and young adult. But I did still have a good number of YA reads. And then to break down the ratings a little bit further, I had 8 5 stars, 8 4 stars, 1 3.5 star, 4 3 stars. That was it. So that's the stats breakdown. Now before we get into the actual books, I want to talk to y'all about my new glasses. So if you saw a couple of my other videos, I have talked about these a couple of times. These are from a company called Zinff, which is an online glasses company that reached out to me and sent me a pair of their glasses to try out, and I love them. I am so picky about glasses because I never feel like glasses look right on my face. I have like a my jaw's off, so one side ends up higher than the other, and I also have like a rounder face, so I feel like it's really hard to find flattering glasses, and these are so great. And what I love about this company is their website has like, you can try on the glasses on the website before you purchase them. So you upload a picture of yourself and you can try on all the different glasses and see which ones are going to look good before you even purchase them. And they looked good online and they look good in person, and I'm so happy. So if you want to see these a little bit closer, they are so lightweight. Like I feel like I'm not even wearing anything, which is also a really big deal to me because I get so many headaches if I have like anything tight around my head. And these don't do that at all. I love the color. And they're so affordable. I priced it out and it's something like $50 or $60 for my prescription and the lenses, including scratch resistance and my night driving lenses and all of that. It only came out to like $50 or $60. And if you've ever bought glasses from like your actual eye doctor, you know how expensive glasses can be. So if you're in the market for new glasses and you like these, or you like the idea of this company, both of those links are down below. I've got a link to these exact glasses and a link to the company in general, and you can get 50% off frames and 10% off lenses using my code LIT, which is also in the description below. And they don't just sell prescription glasses, they also have sunglasses and blue light glasses. So if you're looking for any of that, check out the links down below. Let's get into the video. All right, so 21 books. This is gonna be a minute. The last time I did a wrap up, I actually had someone tell me that I talked too much about one book. That's not gonna change, so sorry, but it's kind of what I'm here for. So yes, maybe grab a cup of coffee. I will try my absolute best to be as quick as possible here because I don't want to sit in front of this camera for 45 minutes. But also, we do have 21 books to get through, and I want to give y'all like decent reviews. Like I really don't want to just be like, oh yeah, this one was 5 stars, I liked it, great, let's move on. Like I want to tell y'all why I liked it, why you should read it or why you shouldn't read it. I want to give y'all the information you need to decide if it's something you're interested in, because that's kind of the whole point of me doing this. So I'm deciding in my head at this exact moment if I want to do this in the order that I read them or just start grabbing them off the pile. I think we're gonna do it in order because I like have all my reviews written down in order. So give me a second, I'm gonna put them in order. So the first book that I read in June was Gallant by V.E. Schwab. This is a middle grade horror fantasy type of thing. I've seen it marketed as both middle grade and YA. It felt more middle grade to me. The main character is a little bit older than traditional middle grade, but the actual story like felt more middle grade to me. So I categorized it as middle grade. But this follows Olivia, and she is a girl who does not speak at all. She can see ghosts, and she's basically grown up in an orphanage, but she gets a letter from someone inviting her to Gallant, which is her family's home and the place that her mother's journal warns her never to go. However, when she gets there, everything is not what she thought it was going to be. Nobody actually invited her. Nobody knows who wrote that letter, and it seems like nobody really wants her there. There's definitely a lot of secrets involving Gallant. I gave this book 4 stars. I really loved the writing style. I've never read a V.E. Schwab book before, but I've heard that this is very typical of her writing style. It's very atmospheric, very beautiful, very immersive, and I really, really enjoyed that. I also really loved Olivia as a character. Even though she doesn't say a word throughout the entire book, her personality is just so strong. And I just really loved getting to know her as a character, getting to see her point of view, getting to read through her eyes. Like, I loved her as a character. The reason I didn't give it 5 stars was, one, it felt like nothing happened in the first 60% of the book, and then the last 10% of the book felt incredibly rushed. So that was slightly disappointing. And I also felt like every character other than Olivia felt super underdeveloped, and they basically just existed to like help her. I feel like her cousin was the most developed of the side characters, but everybody else was basically just like very one-dimensional, just kind of there to be there, and I kind of wished we knew more about them. I wished that they had been fleshed out a little bit more, but all in all, it was a really great read. I didn't even know that I liked horror fantasy until I read one, so then I read another one, which we'll talk about later, so this one was a pretty good read. Okay, so the next 2 books I read were kind of together. So I read The Outlandish Companion Volume 1 and Volume 2. So these 2 books are basically nonfiction companions to the Outlander series by Diana Gabaldon. This is where she gives us insider information to her writing process and things about the characters that we don't know from the books. There's also like synopses of every single book in here and information about the TV show and character lists and glossaries. It's basically a reference book. That's exactly what it is. It is a reference book. So it's not really the kind of book that you read cover to cover. You kind of just go in and reference things as you're reading. I did read all of the essays in it and all of the things that weren't, like I skipped the character lists and the glossaries because that's kind of stuff that you just kind of look up as you're going, but I did read all of the essays, so I did count them as read because I did read the probably 80% of each book. I just skipped the actual like reference material. I actually enjoyed them. I mean, they're nonfiction and they're reference books, so I feel like giving them like a star rating is kind of weird. So I mean, on Goodreads, because I feel like I have to put something, I gave it 5 stars, but in actuality, like, it's a reference book. Like, it is what it is. But I did thoroughly enjoy getting to see into her writing process and into the characters' backgrounds and her theory on the time travel in the books and all these different things. I thought it was really intriguing and I did really enjoy them both. Next up, I read The Cheat Sheet. This is by Sarah Adams, and this follows Bree and Nathan. And Bree and Nathan are best friends. Bree is a ballet instructor and Nathan is an NFL quarterback, and they have been friends for years, but they're both secretly in love with each other. So we're already getting to one of my favorite tropes. And we get fake dating in here, which is also a trope I've been obsessed with lately. This book was super, super short. It's like, oh gosh, I don't even know how long it is. It's barely 200 pages. Just kidding, it's 312 pages. It doesn't look that long though. It took me like no time at all to read, but I gave it 4 stars. I thought it was cute. I definitely, like, Bree is very much the very tropey, like not like other girls. She reads like a YA protagonist, but in more of an adult romance. And that was a little bit weird and slightly annoying, but I still enjoyed it. Was it a little bit cringy at certain points? Yeah. Do I care? No, not really. It's also a completely clean romance. So for anybody who doesn't like smut in their romance but doesn't want to read only YA, this is a great contender for you. There is absolutely nothing in it whatsoever. It would be a like 0.5 on my smut scale if you watched that video. There's basically nothing in it at all. So really great contender if you're into that, and I enjoyed it. It was cute. I'm so sorry if you can hear the Roomba hitting the door. I'm just going to ignore it. The next book I read was House of Hollow. This is by Crystal Sutherland, and it was my second horror fantasy book of the month / ever. This follows Iris, and she has two sisters, and they're older sisters. She's the youngest, and all three of them went missing when they were children and then returned a month later with no idea of where they had been. Now it's years and years later. I think Iris is like 17 or 18, and all of a sudden one of her sisters goes missing again, but there's a lot of really strange things happening, and it might be that the world that they were in prior is calling them back, or something is going on here. And this book is really, really creepy, like in a good way, but like it's really creepy. I literally read this book in one sitting because I could not put it down. I was confused, but in a good way, and I absolutely had to know where this was going. I gave it 4 stars because I felt like the reveal at the end was like, I saw it coming before it happened, so it wasn't a shock, which I kind of prefer when it's a shock. But it was still really good. Like, I still really enjoyed it. It was the perfect amount of horror to fantasy. I really enjoyed that part. I felt like this was a better version of the Hazelwood. It reminded me a lot of the Hazelwood, but I liked this one significantly better than that. I also thought it slightly reminded me of Horrid, which is a YA horror novel. So it's like if the Hazelwood meets Horrid, kind of ish. I'm gonna go with that. But I really enjoyed it. I kind of want to read more horror fantasy now because I kind of like it. Next up, I read Bully, and this is by Penelope Douglas, and I've talked about this a lot in some reading vlogs. I have thoughts. So first, I liked this more than I thought I would. I did give it 4 stars. I think. Did I? No, I bumped it down to 3 stars. I almost gave it 4 stars. I was so close to giving it 4 stars. Basically, this follows our main character, Tate, and she and her best friend, I think it's Jared. Yeah, his name is Jared, and they were best friends until suddenly they weren't. And she doesn't know when that switch flipped or really what happened, but suddenly one day he becomes the biggest bully in her life, and they're clearly not friends anymore. And then she leaves for a year to like go overseas and study abroad to basically get away from him. Then when she returns, she decides that she is going to fight back. So this is a true bully romance. It kind of reminded me of like The Cruel Prince, because that's kind of like a fantasy bully romance, and I felt the same way about both books, in which I had a really, really hard time forgiving Carden and Jared by the end. Still don't know that I actually did for either of them. It was a super, super slow burn, and did have really great romance moments. Like when there were romance moments, they were great. There weren't that many. It's also got a lot of racing elements to it, like car racing, which I thought was super cool. Gave me all the Fast and Furious vibes, which is one of my favorite movies, so I kind of want to read the rest of the series. I did see at Barnes & Noble yesterday that there's like book 1.5, but it's like a full novel, and it's basically this, but from Jared's point of view, and I definitely should have bought it because I want to read that. I want to read that. There were definitely some issues I have with this book. I still, like, I did not fully forgive Jared by the end of it, and maybe that'll change if I read his point of view. It kind of changed once I read some of Carden's point of view in the little novella for The Cruel Prince. So we'll see. That could change, but I kind of doubt it. I think his whole reasoning for being a bully was stupid. I also absolutely hated her best friend, Casey. If I had a friend that treated me like that, I would just not have that friend. Like, there's no coming back from some of the things that she did. There's no redeeming her for what she did to her best friend. So, yes. I also just did not like the way that Tate's virginity was handled in this book, like at all, like the topic of it at all. I felt like hers was placed on this pedestal, but then his was like, it didn't matter that he had slept with so many different girls. It was like I did not like the double standard there. I didn't think that was right. It was ick. So I don't know on that one. That knocked off a full star. That was the biggest thing that kept me from giving it 4 stars. So all in all, there were things that I liked. I did enjoy the romance. I thought that it had, like, when there was romance, it was really good romance. It was very slow burn, which I generally like slow burn romances, so that was also good. And I've said this before, but basically my feelings on this book is I hate it, but I'm still attracted to it, and so I gave it 3 stars. And that's exactly how I felt about Jared. So I guess job well done. Maybe. Next up, I read A Forgery of Roses. This is by Jessica S. Olsen, and this follows our main character, it starts with an M, Myra. And Myra is a prodigy, which basically means that she's an artist who can literally alter people's physical appearance by painting them. So this magic is forbidden in her kingdom, but the governor's wife discovers what she can do and hires her to paint her son back to life, basically. So nobody in the kingdom knows that the heir is dead, and so Myra is trying to paint him back to life before anybody figures it out, but the governor does not know that this is happening, and he will kill her for it, so there's that. So basically the way her magic works is in order to paint him back to life, she has to know how he died and like the circumstances around that, but everybody's being very, very secretive about it, and there's definitely some things that are not adding up, and the more she pries, the more dangerous things seem to get for her. So super interesting premise. This is basically like Stalking Jack the Ripper meets The Picture of Dorian Gray. I thought the concept was really interesting. I thought the magic was unique, and it was interestingly set up. I enjoyed like the plot itself. I did give it 3 stars, and there wasn't necessarily a specific reason why, other than I just felt like it fell flat. It is a standalone fantasy, and I do think that those are very hard to pull off, especially one as short as this one. I felt like the story itself had potential. It just didn't wow me as much as I was hoping it would. But it's not to say that I didn't like it. Like, I did like it. I just didn't love it. I felt like the romance was very underdeveloped. I didn't care for the romance all that much. It was just kind of okay. The mystery was intriguing. I did enjoy that part. I did guess quite a few things before the end, but there were a couple of things I didn't see coming, so that was good. So all in all, just kind of like a good read that I enjoyed and would recommend. Not my favorite standalone fantasy, but still good. Still enjoyed it. Next up, I read In the Country Dark by Mike Mallow. I borrowed this book from my mother-in-law, and the author is someone that she knows. And it's set in West Virginia, and it's basically like a crime thriller type of thing. We've got our 2 main characters were friends as kids. They haven't spoken to each other in years, but they somehow both end up in this situation in West Virginia with like a crime lord and danger and things like that. It's super short. It was good. I enjoyed it. It was definitely not my usual genre. It didn't feel like traditional thriller. It felt more like true crime without being true kind of thing. So it wasn't like my typical genre of books, but for what it was, I did enjoy it. I would be interested. I know that the author has another book, at least one other book, and I think another one coming out maybe, and I would be interested to see how that writing has developed over the course of the last few years. So I would be interested in reading more from this author. I don't feel like I have a ton to say about it because it's not my usual genre, but all in all, it was decent. I enjoyed it. Next up, I read The Deal by Elle Kennedy. This is a college hockey new adult romance, and it is perfect. I gave this book 5 stars so quickly. I loved this book. This follows Hannah and Garrett, and Hannah is like a straight A student, but she has this huge crush on a football player at her university, and Garrett is a hockey player who is failing philosophy class, and he is asking Hannah to tutor him. She doesn't want to, but she agrees in exchange for Garrett helping her get this football player. So you can imagine where it goes from there. I'll give you a second, just imagine it. I know, right? Yes. So this book is everything. Elle Kennedy is everything. I want to read everything she's ever written. This is the perfect amount of plot to smut. Perfect. Like this ratio of plot to smut, this is everything I want in a book. So I absolutely adored it. It is so cute. I love how smart and feisty Hannah is. I love how like sweet but sexy Garrett is. Like they are so perfect together. It set up the series so well, and I just am obsessed with it. Next up was my one audiobook, and that was The Prison Healer by Lynette Nani. This was a reread for me because I want to read all the books now that all the books are out. So I finished The Prison Healer in June. I actually finished The Gilded Cage in July, but I thoroughly enjoyed this the second time I read it. I actually think I liked it as an audiobook more than a physical book. I'm really picky about audiobooks, but I felt like I really liked this one. I enjoyed the narrator for this one a lot, and I felt like it was just done really well as an audiobook. So basically this follows Kiva, and she is a healer in a prison called Zalendov, and she is also a prisoner and has been for the last 10 years of her life since she was 7 years old, I think. And suddenly she gets a new prisoner, and whenever a new prisoner comes in, she has to like brand them basically, and check them out if they're injured on their journey. So there's this new strange boy who won't leave her alone and seems to have a lot of secrets, so she's very intrigued by that. But then they get another new prisoner who just so happens to be the Rebel Queen, and the Rebel Queen is sentenced to the trial by ordeal, which is basically like 4 elemental trials that no one has ever survived, but if you survive them all, you get set free. Problem is that the Rebel Queen is completely unconscious and is not going to wake up in time, so Kiva decides to take her place in the trials. This is so much fun, guys. The first time I read this book, I gave it 4 stars, but if we're being honest, I might bump it up now that I've reread it, especially now that I've read the second book. I just really, really like this. It's a YA fantasy, and I find that I'm struggling a lot more with YA fantasy as I get older, but I still feel like this is a really solid YA fantasy. Like I really enjoyed this one. I really enjoy Kiva as a character. I really enjoy the story itself. Usually I don't like elemental magic, but I feel like it's done well in this book, and it reminds me a lot of Red Queen, but I didn't like Red Queen at all, and I really liked this book. So I'm gonna say like a better version of Red Queen. Yes, let's go with that. But I just really enjoyed it. I think it's really fun, and honestly the ending just spins it in such an interesting direction, and the second book is just as good, and I'll talk about that in the end of this month, I promise, but I can't wait to read the third one. Next book I read was Poison Study. This was supposed to be my TBR treat that I was supposed to buy this month or in June, but I ended up just getting it from the library because I wasn't sure if I wanted to commit to buying the whole series or not, and I still haven't quite decided yet. But I gave this book 3.5 stars. I rounded it up to 4 on Goodreads. Basically, we're following Elena, who has been sentenced to execution because of a murder that she very much did commit. But she gets a choice, either be executed or become the general governor, leader, person of their kingdom's food taster. So she takes that option. So basically she's being trained by Valak, who is the leader person's assassin, to test for poisons and protect this leader person. But there's a lot of people trying to kill her, there's a lot of people trying to kill him, there's a lot of things happening, and she has some very big secrets that she can never let anybody know. I liked it, almost loved it, and I feel like I went in expecting different things, and I spent the first like half of the book thinking things wrong. I thought Valak was like 50. He's not. And I realized that when other things started happening, and I was like, oh, okay. I was very wrong in some of my assumptions about certain characters, and about where certain plot lines were going, like very wrong. So I actually did end up enjoying it more than I thought I would. I do think I want to read the rest of the series. I'm conflicted. It's not like a series that I'm like dying to read the next book, but I do kind of want to read the next book, so we'll see. Next up, I read A Strange Hymn. This is the second book in the Bargainer series by Laura Thalassa, and I loved it. I've already talked a lot about the first book in my May wrap up, and I am still obsessed with this series. The number one complaint I keep seeing in reviews that aren't super high for this series is that Desmond is problematic. I mean, yes, he is, but he's a morally gray character. He's a fairy, like he's supposed to be, like that's kind of the point. So like y'all can't be asking for morally gray characters and then complain when they act morally gray. So yes, he has some problems. He is not always a good person, but he's not supposed to be, so it's okay. But I really enjoyed this book. The plot thickens. It gets really good. Can't really say much about it without like giving things away, so we'll leave it at that. But on the same note, I also read The Emperor of Evening Stars, which is book 2.5 in that same series. This is all Desmond's point of view, and it is basically like a prequel. It's all about Desmond's life before the events of the first book, and it is so intriguing. Like it explains everything. Like if you're so concerned about like the morally gray and the problematic and the not understanding this and the not understanding why he did that, like just read this book. It explains everything. Also really enjoyed this, and it's super short, so I think I read this one and the third one in like one sitting together. So right after that I did read the third one, which is Dark Harmony, and it wrapped it up so nicely. I really enjoyed this whole series. It's definitely a series that I would like to reread. It's definitely like if you like the new adult fantasy romance, if you like fae, this has got all of that. So then I read Monstrous volumes 1 and 2, and this series, do not ask me what it's about because I truly cannot tell you. I still have no idea. I was lost through the whole thing. And I do want to read the rest of the series because I am curious now. So basically this is like a steampunk fantasy horror type of thing. We have our main character, I don't know if it's Maika or Mika, but she is basically, there was like this war between the humans and like the Arcanics, and I don't know if I'm remembering this correctly. So we have humans. There were 3 groups. Hold on. Hold on, I gotta look this up because I don't remember. Okay, so there are like different like races in this. So we've got like the humans, and then we have the ancients. So they're like, I guess kind of like, so the ancients from my understanding are like animals, but like humanoid animals, like they talk like humans, I think, but they are animals, or at least they look like animals. Then we have the Arcanics that are like the offspring between the two, which goes down a whole different thought pattern that I will not be investigating whatsoever. So our main character is like a child of that war. I think she is an Arcanic, but basically she's trying to figure out her past. She's trying to survive, do something. She's on the run, and her mom had a lot of secrets, but her mom's dead. Yeah, like I said, I was very, very confused for the whole thing. So yes, so my thoughts on it. I did really like the art style. I am very picky about graphic novels as well, and I really enjoyed this art style. I'm discovering that I really like horror graphic novels, but I'm also discovering that like a lot of things that don't bother me in like actual books where I'm just like reading the words on the page tend to be a little bit worse when you see it in a picture. It's like, oh, and then the guy got decapitated, and you're reading it and you're like, okay, cool. And then you like actually see it on the page and there's all this blood and you're like, oh, okay, that's actually like a lot darker than I realized it would be. Cool. So yeah, I definitely really like the art style. I also really like that it's horror. I do think that it's a little bit confusing. The second book definitely explained more, but it's now been like a week and a half since I read it, and I've already forgotten like all of it. So I feel like if I'm gonna read the rest of the series, I'm gonna have to reread from the beginning. So I just don't know how well it's going to stick in my brain because it is a little bit over my head, but I did enjoy it. And if you are a regular graphic novel reader of graphic novel fantasies, I think it's good. I'm super intrigued. I do want to read the rest. It makes me feel stupid when I read it because I don't understand anything that's happening. But, you know, that's okay. Next up, I read The Beautiful by Renee Audier. My sister is borrowing this book, so I only have the dust jacket. But I did really enjoy it. It reminded me so much of Stalking Jack the Ripper. But basically, we have our main character, Celine, and she has just come to New Orleans from somewhere in Europe, I think France, and she is running from something in her past. And while she is there, she meets some interesting people. She's a dressmaker. She gets asked to make a dress for this girl, but there's definitely something strange about the girl and strange about the company that she keeps, and she keeps running into, Celine keeps running into Sebastian, and there's definitely something strange about Sebastian, but in like a hot way, apparently. Basically, this is like stalking Jack the Ripper in a different setting with some like paranormal aspects to it that Stalking Jack the Ripper didn't have. I enjoyed it a lot. I did give it 4 stars. It is YA, but I felt like it was a really well done YA. I generally don't like historical fiction of any sort, but I did like Outlander, so I guess that's not really true anymore. I have a love-hate relationship with historical fiction, but historical fantasy I am starting to enjoy a little bit more. So I did really love the setting. It is set in New Orleans in 1872. So we get a lot of really atmospheric, very cool things from that. And I thought that like the city, like New Orleans itself, really complemented the story and where the story was going as a whole. Like I thought that was done so well. I also really liked the writing style. I felt like it was beautiful and atmospheric and lyrical without feeling like overly bogged down by description. I felt like it was that perfect mix that I also felt like in like I feel like it's a slightly less lyrical style than like Strange the Dreamer, but still just as beautiful. I also love Celine, our main character. I love a strong, feisty female character. Just, they're my favorites. And she had such determination and such conflicting feelings between like good and evil and what it means to be either one of those, and like the balance between both of those being in one person kind of thing. Like I really loved that dynamic. So the things that I didn't love that kept it from being a 5-star, the world building wasn't my favorite. This is definitely like a paranormal thriller, historical paranormal thriller. So it's a little bit like, I don't know, my brain tends to separate paranormal versus fantasy, even though they're kind of like one overarching genre, but this is definitely more on the paranormal side of that. And I felt like the paranormal aspects were never really explained in this book. Like they were there, but I didn't really understand them yet. And I do feel like book 2 did start to answer some of those questions, but in the first book I was very confused on a lot of things, and it wasn't like Monstrous where it was like going over my head understanding. It was just like it wasn't like the explanation wasn't there. I also like I didn't not like the romance, but I didn't love it. It felt very typical YA, like there was nothing new there. Sebastian was very much like his only personality trait was to be a YA love interest, like that was it. So I didn't really like feel the love connection, but I did not feel it either, you know? Like if I was rating just the romance, I would give it a 3 out of 5 for just the romance alone. Like it was a decent romance. It did the things it was supposed to do, but it wasn't anything new and it wasn't anything that I got overly attached to. But all in all, I did really enjoy the book, and I did read the second book, so let's talk about that. So the second book I also gave 4 stars, and this is The Damned. This book is very different from the first book, and there's only so much that I can talk about without giving things away. So I'm going to say what I can without giving spoilers, but we get a lot more of Bastian's point of view in this book, which I did like. It definitely changed my view of him, like, significantly. I didn't care so much for the fact that we didn't get Celine's point of view back until like a third of the way through the book. That was slightly frustrating to me. But the one thing that tripped me up was it switches to first person point of view in the second book, but only Bastian's point of view. So like the first book is almost exclusively written from Celine's point of view, with like a few other chapters that are different for reasons that I can't really talk about, but her point of view was always third person. So then we're getting mostly Bastian's point of view in this book, and it's all first person, and that threw me off like a lot. But I did end up really liking Bastian in this book. I feel like he got more of a personality here. I understood him a little bit better. I still didn't see the romance connection as much as I wanted to, but I was starting to see it from his point of view a little bit more, which was making me enjoy that a little bit more. I also thought the world building was significantly better in this book. A lot of things are explained. I understand a lot more, and I was actually able to like start enjoying the paranormal aspects because I actually understood what they were at this point. Things I didn't enjoy. I can't really talk about the one without giving anything away, but our antagonist, I don't understand the motivations of this person at all. Like I just don't. And maybe that will be explained in book 3 or 4, but as of this moment, I don't get it. I don't get why the antagonist is the antagonist. So there's that. I also wasn't super thrilled that the ending was another cliffhanger. I'm kind of tired of those. Like the first book was a cliffhanger, this one's a cliffhanger, the third one's probably gonna be a cliffhanger, and the fourth one doesn't even come out until next year. So I don't own the third one yet, so I don't know, I'm kind of putting it off a little bit, so I haven't read it yet. because I just don't want another cliffhanger. But all in all, I liked it. I think I liked this one slightly. I don't know, I liked different things about each one. Like, I liked Celine a lot, so like I liked the points of view of the first one a lot, and I liked the first book a lot. But I really liked getting Bastian's point of view in this book too, and I liked how I was like the paranormal aspects were more developed in this book. So I don't know, that's why they're pretty equal, both 4 stars. Next up, I read The Mistake, which is the second book in Elle Kennedy's Off-Campus series. It's right after The Deal, and this follows Logan, who is Garrett's best friend from the first book, and he thinks that he is in love with Hannah, and he's real upset about it because he can't get over her. So in a stupid decision, he finds a girl who can be a distraction for him, and then he makes a stupid decision that pushes her away, and then we get like the summer, and then it's the next year, then it's the next school year, and he has to try and win her back, and Grace is having none of it. I really liked this book. I was afraid that this was going to be one of those romance series where I really liked the first couple in the first book and then didn't like the subsequent couples and the rest of the books. Not the case. I gave this one 5 stars as well. I also feel like this was a really good balance between plot and smut. I think it's different than the first book. Like, you get it a lot faster, but I can understand why. Like, it made sense for the plot, so like that was fine with me. Usually I prefer that not to be like super quick in the book, but it made sense in this one, so I was cool with it. I also really like that the characters and the story is so different from the first one. Like, they're definitely, I find like in a lot of romance series, the girls start to blend together, the guys start to blend together, and then it just feels like the same couple in different scenarios, and I didn't feel like this. Like, Grace and Hannah feel very different, Logan and Garrett feel very different, and I really appreciated that. So all in all, thoroughly enjoyed it. Was it realistic? Absolutely not, but we are not here for realism. Not on this channel. So thoroughly enjoyed it, could not wait to pick up the third one. And I actually didn't wait like at all. Like, I think I started at like 10 minutes after I finished the second one. So I also read The Score, which is book 3 in the Off-Campus series by Elle Kennedy. And this follows Hannah's best friend Allie from the first book, and Dean, who is another one of the hockey players that lives with Garrett and Logan. And basically, Dean is the definition of a player, and Allie has been on and off again with her boyfriend Sean for years. So they end up in some sort of like rebound situation that then begins to get complicated. And I was really nervous about this book. I didn't think I was gonna like it, which I said with the second one as well, but I wasn't sure that this was a premise I was gonna like. I didn't care for Dean all that much in the first 2 books. I thought he was kind of a jerk. I mean, he kind of is, but he redeems himself, like he does. It's okay. I think I actually liked this one more than the second one a little bit. I don't know. I have a really hard time picking my favorite of the 3 that I've read so far. I love them all for very different reasons. I ended up loving Dean by the end of this book. I really liked Allie too. I thought at first that she was going to be really annoying. I didn't really like her in the first book, and I was nervous that I wasn't going to like her in this book, but I did end up liking her a lot. And again, they're very different from the couples of the first 2 books. They're not the same at all. This one is definitely the spiciest. I feel like this one, I felt like the first one was the perfect ratio. This one's a bit much, but it also needs to be for the plot. Like, it needs to be in this book because of the characters that we are reading about. It needed to have a higher level of spice to make sense with the plot. So I support it. It was a little bit much though, but I understand why, and I still enjoyed it. So solid read. Can't wait to read the next one. I've heard that the next one doesn't have the same vibes as the first 3, so that one makes me a little bit nervous. I also know that the next one has a trope that I don't like at all, so that also makes me a little bit nervous. But we'll see. We're definitely going to give it a shot. And then last up for June, I read Shipt by Angie Hockman. This book follows Henley and Graham, and they are co-workers at the same company who are both up for the same promotion, and they work for a cruise ship line. So in order to work on that promotion, they have to come up with a proposal, which requires them to go on a cruise together and like come up with an idea. So definitely hating game meets people you meet on vacation. It was solid. I gave it 4 stars, I think. It was good. It wasn't like anything phenomenal that I was like, oh, I've never seen this before, this is great. It was a very typical rom-com, but it was cute. I did enjoy it. Great last read. All right, so that is everything I read in June. I have a lot more planned for July, so if you want to see what I'm gonna read, I will have my July TBR linked below, and I will see y'all in the next video. Bye.
Oh my love,